What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors goes head-to-head with late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Danny DeVito sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a lighthearted, promotional interview, only to witness the most explosive confrontation in talk show history. This isn't just another celebrity spat. This is a masterclass in how quickly respect can crumble when egos collide under the bright studio lights. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when two entertainment titans clash in ways that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about Hollywood professionalism. The stage was set for disaster from the moment Danny DeVito walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel live set. What should have been a routine appearance to promote his latest project quickly transformed into a powder keg of tension that would explode across social media within hours. The veteran actor, known for his decades of professionalism and wit, found himself facing off against a host whose reputation for pushing boundaries was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As the cameras rolled and the audience settled into their seats, anticipating the usual comedic banter between DeVito and Kimmel, nobody could have predicted that they were about to witness a confrontation so intense it would dominate entertainment headlines for weeks. The initial pleasantries seemed normal enough. DeVito took his seat beside Kimmel's desk with his characteristic charm, waving to the enthusiastic crowd who clearly adored the seasoned performer. "Danny DeVito, everybody," Kimmel announced with his trademark smirk, but there was something different in his demeanor tonight. Those who know Kimmel's hosting style could sense an unusual edge in his voice, a barely contained aggression that seemed to simmer just beneath his forced smile. DeVito, ever the professional, settled into his chair and prepared for what he assumed would be another standard late-night interview promoting his work. The trouble began almost immediately when Kimmel opened with what appeared to be a harmless question about DeVito's age and recent projects. "So Danny, you're what, 79 now? That's getting up there. Are you still able to keep up with the younger actors on set, or do they have to slow things down for you?" The question landed with an uncomfortable thud in the studio. The audience's laughter felt forced, uncertain. DeVito's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but those watching closely could see the flash of annoyance cross his weathered features. "Well, Jimmy, I think experience counts for something in this business. I've been doing this since before you were born, and I'm still here because I know how to do the job right." His response was measured but carried an unmistakable warning that Kimmel seemed determined to ignore. Kimmel pressed on, seemingly oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the growing tension. Right. But let's be honest, Hollywood's changed a lot. These days it's all about social media presence and staying relevant. Do you even understand how Twitter works? Or do you have someone handle that for you?" The condescending tone was impossible to miss now, and several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. DeVito's jaw tightened visibly. "I understand plenty about staying relevant, Jimmy. The difference is I do it through my work, not by making cheap shots at guests who come on my show." The emphasis on "my show" was deliberate and cutting, a not-so-subtle reminder of whose career had more longevity and respect attached to it. But Kimmel, perhaps emboldened by his home field advantage or simply too deep into his antagonistic approach to back down, doubled down on his disrespectful line of questioning. "Oh, come on, Danny, don't be so sensitive. This is comedy. Can't you take a joke anymore? Or has age made you too fragile for a little ribbing?" The word fragile hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the studio could feel the atmosphere growing dangerously tense. DeVito leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a lower, more serious register that commanded attention. "There's a difference between comedy and disrespect, son. I've been in this business long enough to know the difference. And right now, you're crossing a line." The use of "son" was particularly pointed, establishing not just an age dynamic, but a hierarchy of experience and earned respect that Kimmel was systematically dismantling. The studio audience had gone notably quiet now, sensing that something was very wrong with the usual flow of the show. This wasn't the playful back and forth they'd come to expect from celebrity interviews. This was something much more raw and uncomfortable, and the tension was becoming palpable even through the television screens of viewers at home. As the commercial break approached, what had started as a seemingly routine interview had already devolved into something much more serious and confrontational, setting the stage for an escalation that would soon spiral completely out of control. When the cameras rolled again after the break, any hope of salvaging the interview had evaporated. Kimmel returned with an even more aggressive posture, as if the brief intermission had only fueled his determination to push DeVito further. The veteran actor sat rigidly in his chair, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a steely resolve that anyone who knew him would recognize as a warning sign. "We're back with Danny DeVito," Kimmel announced, his voice carrying a mocking undertone that made several crew members exchange worried glances. "Danny, during the break you seemed a little upset. Are you having trouble keeping up with the pace of live television these days?" The question was delivered with such calculated cruelty that it left no doubt about Kimmel's intentions. DeVito's response was immediate and sharp. "Jimmy, I've been doing live television since you were in diapers. The only thing I'm having trouble with is understanding why you think attacking your guests is entertainment." His voice carried decades of authority, the kind that comes from surviving and thriving in an industry known for eating people alive. But Kimmel seemed intoxicated by the confrontation, pushing even harder. "Look, I get it. You're from a different generation. Maybe the fast-paced world of modern comedy just isn't for you anymore. Have you considered retirement? I mean, when was your last really successful project?" The studio fell into stunned silence, as Kimmel crossed yet another line of basic professional courtesy. DeVito's eyes flashed with genuine anger now. "My last successful project? Let me tell you something about success, kid. Success isn't measured by how many people you can insult on television. It's measured by how many people respect you when the cameras stop rolling. And right now, I'm wondering if anyone in this building respects you at all." The accusation hit its mark, and for the first time Kimmel's composure cracked slightly. His forced smile wavered as he realized that DeVito wasn't going to back down or play along with his aggressive approach. "Oh, so now you're questioning my credibility? That's rich, coming from someone who peaked in the 80s. "Peaked in the 80s? DeVito repeated, his voice rising with indignation. "I've had a successful career spanning 6 decades. I've directed, produced, and acted in films that people still watch and love today. What have you done besides sit behind this desk and tear people down?" The challenge was direct and devastating, striking at the heart of Kimmel's insecurities about his own legacy. The audience was completely silent now, some covering their mouths in shock at witnessing such an unprecedented breakdown in talk show decorum. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a genuine confrontation between two men with fundamentally different views of what professionalism meant. Kimmel, perhaps realizing he was losing control of the situation, but too deep into his antagonistic approach to retreat, made his most damaging mistake yet. "Well, Danny, maybe if you weren't so sensitive about your height, your age, and your fading relevance, you could take a joke like the old days. Remember when comedians used to be tough?" The comment about DeVito's height, a subject the actor had handled with grace and humor throughout his entire career, was the final straw. DeVito stood up from his chair, his compact frame radiating more authority and dignity than Kimmel had shown all evening. "That's enough," he said, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "I've been in this business long enough to know the difference between comedy and cruelty, and what you're doing right now is just cruelty." Kimmel, perhaps finally understanding that he had pushed too far, attempted a weak backtrack. "Come on, Danny, sit down. We're just having fun here." But his voice lacked conviction, and everyone in the studio could sense that the damage was irreversible. "Fun?" DeVito replied, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is your idea of fun? Insulting guests who come on your show in good faith? Let me tell you what's not fun. Watching someone destroy their own reputation in real time." The words hung in the air like a prophecy that was already coming true. The tension had reached a breaking point that neither man could walk back from, and everyone in the studio knew that something explosive was about to happen. What happened next would be replayed endlessly across social media and news outlets for weeks to come. DeVito, still standing beside his chair, looked directly into the camera with the kind of gravitas that only comes from decades of commanding respect in Hollywood. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed the audience both in the studio and at home, "you're witnessing something that shouldn't happen on television or anywhere else. A host who has forgotten the basic principles of respect and decency." Kimmel, realizing that DeVito was essentially hijacking his own show, desperately tried to regain control. "Danny, please, let's just move on to your movie. We can talk about your new project." But his voice betrayed panic, as he understood that the veteran actor was not going to let this slide or pretend everything was normal. "My new project?" DeVito turned back to face Kimmel, his expression a mixture of disappointment and disgust. "You want to talk about my work now, after spending the last 15 minutes trying to humiliate me on national television? That's not how this works, Jimmy. You don't get to attack someone's character and then casually change the subject when it becomes inconvenient for you." The studio audience was completely captivated now, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a historic moment in television. The crew members looked between each other uncertainly, unsure whether they should cut to commercial or let this unprecedented confrontation play out on live television. Kimmel made another desperate attempt to salvage the situation, but his approach only made things worse. "Look, if you can't handle a little comedy roasting, maybe late-night television isn't the right venue for you anymore. This is what we do here. We have fun with our guests." His words dripped with condescension, completely missing the irony that he was continuing to insult DeVito, even while claiming to want to move forward. DeVito's response was swift and devastating. "Comedy roasting? Is that what you call it when you attack someone's age, their physical appearance, and their career achievements? Let me explain something to you about comedy, since you seem confused about the concept. Comedy punches up, not down. Comedy brings people together, it doesn't tear them apart. What you've been doing tonight isn't comedy. It's bullying with an audience." The words hit Kimmel like physical blows, and for the first time all evening he seemed genuinely speechless. The silence stretched uncomfortably as the host struggled to find a response that wouldn't further incriminate him or escalate the situation beyond repair. DeVito continued, his voice gaining strength and moral authority with each word. "I've worked with some of the greatest comedians of all time. People who understood that making people laugh doesn't require making other people feel small. You want to know what real comedy looks like? It looks like building people up, finding the humor in shared human experiences, not exploiting someone's trust when they come on your show." The audience began to murmur among themselves, and it was clear that sentiment was shifting decisively toward DeVito. Several people could be heard agreeing with his assessment, and the energy in the room had transformed from uncomfortable tension to something approaching righteous indignation on behalf of the veteran actor. Kimmel, perhaps sensing that he was losing not just the argument but potentially his credibility with his own audience, made one final catastrophic attempt to regain the upper hand. "Danny, I think you're being a little dramatic here. Maybe if you weren't so insecure about getting older in Hollywood, you wouldn't take everything so personally. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, that maybe it's time for some of the older generation to step aside and make room for fresh talent." The studio erupted, not in laughter but in audible gasps and expressions of shock at Kimmel's doubling down on his disrespectful approach. Even his own band members looked uncomfortable, with some shaking their heads in disapproval. The comment was so tone-deaf and cruel that it seemed to surprise even Kimmel himself as soon as the words left his mouth. DeVito's face darkened with an anger that was no longer just personal, but professional. "Fresh talent?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Let me tell you about fresh talent, Jimmy. Fresh talent respects the people who came before them. Fresh talent understands that this industry is built on the shoulders of those who paved the way. What you're showing tonight isn't fresh talent. It's ignorance, arrogance, and a complete lack of class." The confrontation had now transcended a simple disagreement between host and guest. It had become a clash between two completely different philosophies about respect, professionalism, and the entertainment industry itself, with DeVito representing old-school dignity and Kimmel embodying everything wrong with modern celebrity culture. DeVito stood motionless for a moment, letting Kimmel's latest insult hang in the air like toxic smoke. The studio had fallen into an almost reverent silence, as if everyone present understood they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. When DeVito finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of experience, and the moral authority that comes from taking the high road when others choose the gutter. "You know what, Jimmy?" DeVito said, his tone now calm but filled with unmistakable finality. "I came here tonight to talk about my work, to connect with people who might enjoy what I do, and to have a pleasant conversation. Instead, I've been subjected to 15 minutes of personal attacks disguised as entertainment. That's not entertainment, that's just sad." Kimmel, perhaps finally grasping the magnitude of his mistakes, attempted one last desperate save. "Danny, come on, let's start over. We got off on the wrong foot here." But his words sounded hollow and insincere, coming far too late to repair the damage he had systematically inflicted throughout the interview. DeVito shook his head slowly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both disappointment and pity. "Start over? Jimmy, you can't unring a bell. You can't take back what you've shown everyone tonight about who you really are when the cameras are rolling. This isn't a bad night for you. This is who you've chosen to be." The veteran actor began to remove his microphone, his movements deliberate and dignified. "I've been doing this for over 50 years, he continued, addressing both Kimmel and the audience. "I've worked with legends. I've seen careers rise and fall, and I've learned that how you treat people, especially when you have power over them, defines who you are as a human being." As DeVito handed his microphone to a stunned production assistant, he delivered what would become the most quoted line from the entire confrontation. "Jimmy, you have a platform that reaches millions of people every night. You could use it to lift people up, to bring joy, to celebrate the things that make us human. Instead, you've chosen to use it to tear people down. That's not just unprofessional. It's a waste of an incredible opportunity." The studio audience began to applaud spontaneously, starting with scattered claps that quickly built into sustained applause. Several people stood up, creating a standing ovation that was clearly directed at DeVito rather than the show itself. Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, watching his own audience reject his behavior in real time. DeVito acknowledged the applause with a gracious nod, then turned to face Kimmel one final time. "I hope you figure out what kind of host and what kind of person you want to be, but I won't be part of this anymore." He gestured broadly at the studio, encompassing not just the physical space but everything it represented in that moment. With that, Danny DeVito walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live stage with more dignity and class than the host had shown all evening. He moved steadily toward the exit, his posture straight and his head held high, looking every inch the consummate professional that decades in Hollywood had proven him to be. The cameras captured every step of his departure, and the silence that followed was deafening. Kimmel sat alone at his desk, facing an audience that had just witnessed him systematically destroy his own credibility. The crew scrambled to figure out how to handle the remaining time in the show, but nothing they could do would erase what had just transpired. As DeVito disappeared through the studio doors, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet, it was clear that something fundamental had shifted. The veteran actor had not just left a talk show, he had delivered a masterclass in maintaining dignity under attack and standing up for basic human decency in an industry that too often forgets both. The incident would dominate social media. Within hours, with clips of DeVito's moral stand going viral and Kimmel's behavior being universally condemned, industry veterans rallied to DeVito's defense, sharing their own stories of the actor's professionalism and kindness over the decades. Meanwhile, Kimmel faced a torrent of criticism that would ultimately lead to significant drops in his shows, ratings, and serious questions about his future as a host. In the end, the confrontation served as a powerful reminder of the importance of respect and professionalism in the entertainment industry, with Danny DeVito emerging as an unlikely but powerful voice for dignity and decency in Hollywood.